Can we start? Okay. So this dedicated for the refuah of all the cholim of Klal Yisrael, and to protect the soldiers, to have them have bracha and hatzlacha, and to release the hostages, and for a family friend of ours from years ago, we drifted from our sea, he passed away. A guy by the name of Les Frank, dedicated for his neshama. I don't know his Hebrew name, but let him also have Aliyah for his neshama, our learning today.
Amen.
Okay, so just a quick one, continuing with the theme of the Ten Commandments, and I saw this earlier. The ninth commandment is that one should not bear false witness, and I think it also ties into the Eidim Zumamim. But that's not what I'm going to discuss about this. So basically, it's it is making up allegations without proof, and even just making false allegations, which unfortunately happens in this world, to destroy someone's reputation, even if it's false. And I had a conversation with someone a few months ago, a family friend, who has different political views to mine, let's put it that way. And I said, don't you think it's immoral, regardless of which political party or political figure, if they make false allegations against someone to destroy the reputation, doesn't matter who it is. No, he didn't agree with me. He didn't think there was anything wrong with this because he doesn't like that particular figure. And I said, but that's, how can you, would you like it if someone did that to you? And he couldn't answer me. Yeah, because basically, yeah, it destroys someone's reputation, and based on falsehood. And it goes back to the thing that we got to be as honest as possible, and do things the right way, and treat people, even if one may not like a certain person, we have to treat people the right way.
Good. I agree. And by the way, all of the 10 commandments are able to carry a death penalty. So we understand kidnapping does, not just normal theft. Now, this commandment that's, you talk about, Kevin, about not bearing false witness against your neighbor, that's found in Shemot chapter 20, verse 16. And basically, you are chayiv misa, eligible for the death penalty, if you bear false witness against your neighbor that causes that particular Jew to go to his death. So in other words, if you accuse him of murder and you say you witnessed a murder, then and they catch you midway through the trial, they'll give the death penalty. So that Eidim Zomimim can have a death penalty, but it doesn't always. If you want to try and extract money from somebody with false testimony, what you try to do to them will be done to you. If you want to get corporal punishment of lashes, it's done to you. But because there's an element of, if you try to get your fellow Jew the death penalty and one's caught lying, I don't mean you as in Kevin, I mean as the proverbial you, it means that it does carry the death penalty. So all 10 commandments do carry a death penalty at its most extreme level. All right, so let's get started.
One sec, sorry about this.
Sure. All right, I'm going to ask a question now to Gavin.
I'm on sabbatical, but you're welcome to ask.
So how long is the Barbara Ultra sabbatical? 7 years?
It's about 70. It's
Okay.
a lifetime. It's a lifetime of sabbatical. You saw what Anne said there. That the less you do, the better it is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, half the patients are like that. They're actually just not mobile.
Sorry about that.
Some of it, I think, is sometimes possibly laziness. They don't like training as well. But anyway, I don't want to comment. Let's continue.
I'm going to ask each of you a question. Arthur, I'm going to get an understanding from Arthur, Kevin, and Gavin. why do you need both cases of the Mishnah? And Arthur, what are both cases of the Mishnah and why do you need both?
That's my answer. Don't know.
Okay, good. Okay, no problem. Kevin, what are the two cases of the Mishnah and why do you need both?
What are they? Give me a sec.
No, don't look at your notes. That's cheating. But
No, I'm not looking at any notes. I'm looking at
I'm
this.
teasing.
There's no
You can
notes
ask,
there.
you can look at whatever you want. I'm actually just having you on, but
No,
only
it's fine.
effort.
No.
It's like who wants to be a millionaire? You
Um,
can't be on Google. They send somebody to your house
it's
before
with
you phone a friend to check that they're not from the north.
yeah. They so the cases with the not the wine and the oh yeah with the guy catching the ferry
No.
and
Just the two cases in the Mishnah. You had it. The one and
the ferry the wine and
you
the
know
honey.
ferries. Ferries are in Long Island with
Yeah,
LGBT people.
it's a fairy tale.
And Seabrugge, yeah. So okay, so the what is the case of the Mishnah where somebody has this person has honey in a barrel, and his friend has wine in a barrel. And the barrel, the honey gets damaged, and he'll lose his honey, and he asks the guy for the wine to empty his wine out to use it because it's more valuable. But the guy who owned the wine is also going to lose out, and should be compensated. Otherwise, he's going to for the minimum the value of the wine. But going back also because it might be Hefka, he could have a claim on the honey, which
No. So that's sufficient. That's sufficient. So do we say that's perfect for the first clause of the Mishnah? Is that unless he stipulates, he doesn't get anything more than the fee of his label and the fee for the rental of the container. So he has to stipulate. And we're seeing proofs that there are different opinions. Not everybody agrees with the Mishnah. Some people say that if there's going to be a loss, like in the Brisa of this last ferryman, fisherman boat story and the prisoner, that he has to be compensated. The Mishnah says you're only compensated if you ask for compensation. Otherwise, you're not compensated. Now, what's the issue, Gavin? What's the second part of the Mishnah?
The second one is the case with and then I'll outsource I'll ring a friend for the third part of the question. But second part I can answer. At least it's a start. So the second part of the second example is with the donkeys. So the one guy's got a cheaper donkey of like 50 zuz, the other guy's is worth 100. He sacrifices his 50 zuz donkey and he goes for the 100 zuz donkey. And then he expects to get compensated for his donkey, and he doesn't, unless he got permission up front. What's the difference between the two?
Excellent. So between Kevin and Gavin.
And the third part,
Here we go.
doesn't have to do with whether the wine is tamei or not, whether he is for sprinkling or
that's a sub argument about a hole in the Tuma and Tara or whatever. But the only expectation Arthur had after all this time was remembering the first and second part of the Mishnah. But I know you're cooking for the family. I know Arthur's had a heavy day with doing stuff for me and himself and his health. So he knows it. I know he knows it because he did it with Rabbi Cohen and he's prepared. And sometimes when you're not feeling well, you just don't understand the question, but he does understand the depth.
That was kind of weird. Like when you asked me, I didn't actually remember anything. My mind was totally blank. Like what were we actually on? And as soon as Kevin started, it started all coming back to me. It was just weird, like I had a block.
Okay, so look, what we're learning is now we need to know, and I know none of you are going to probably answer this, why did we need both cases in the Mishnah? Can anybody volunteer? I'm not picking on people.
So you know what? All I want to say is when you did mention it the other day, yesterday, or the day before, whenever you did, I wasn't actually clear then either because I had brain fog. I actually didn't pick it up.
It's
I
not
was
a
actually going
problem.
to ask.
That's what we do.
So I actually don't know. I remember you saying there's a difference, and you said something I didn't hear. So please,
No problem.
if you can repeat it, I actually don't
Sure.
know. I'd have to guess.
Okay. So look, guys, if the Mishnah had only informed us of the first case in which one poured out his wine to save the honey, we would have assumed it's only in that case the law mandates that if he stipulated full reimbursement for his loss, the owner of the honey must give him the value of all the lost wine. Because in that case, guys, he destroyed his wine with his own hands in order to save his fellow Jews' honey. But here in the case of the donkeys, where the drowning of the donkey could have happened by himself. Why? Because it wasn't actively done by the owner of the donkey. It's not as if he destroyed his wine to save the honey or destroyed his donkey to save his friend's more expensive donkey. It was a passive act where the donkey drowned. And we might have thought that since it wasn't his own hands that did it, that the reason he receives only his fee, the fee of what you call a lifeguard, to save his fellow's donkey, and is not reimbursed for his donkey, is because he wasn't destroying his donkey directly. It was groma. It was indirect by the water. It was a consequence of him taking time out to look after his donkey and looking after the donkey of his fellow, but he never actively destroyed it. So we think perhaps he doesn't receive compensation for his donkey. So what we are saying is, had the Mishnah given us only the case of wine and honey, one might have assumed that the law applies only there, not in the case of the donkeys. Because in the case of the wine, it's obvious that the owner of the wine sustained a loss only because of his efforts to save the honey. There was nothing wrong with his wine. It's not as if it had a leak in the barrel. And he could have left his wine safe in the container. It was lost because he himself ordered out to save this person's honey. In this case, the owner of the honey can't possibly argue that the wine would have been lost anyway. Therefore, he must pay, according to Rashi. And it's just prudent that he has to request payment so there's no misunderstanding. But, guys, in the case of the donkeys, however, the rescuer's sacrifice is a little less obvious because the drowning happened by itself and wasn't accomplished by the rescuer's own hand. So perhaps then the one whose donkey was saved can argue in the court that since the rescuer's donkey might have been lost in any case and drowned because of the water turbulence, he shouldn't be required to reimburse him for it. So the Mishnah must therefore inform us that in this case too, the one whose donkey was saved must compensate the rescuer for his loss. And again, we see both principles occur. And that is that you have to stipulate that you want reimbursement to sacrifice yours in order to help the other. So that's an interesting lesson. Now, I'm going to go the other way around. Say the Mishnah only informed us of the second case in which one abandoned his donkey to save the donkey of his fellow. We would have assumed that it's only in that case that the law mandates that if he didn't specify that he be paid for his donkey, he receives only his fee. Okay? Because the drowning of the donkey happened by itself. So you read the second case, you think obviously he has to specify, because you might have thought it wasn't due to his self-sabotage to help his fellow. The water did it directly, and therefore we don't often pay for groma indirect damage. But saying the reason why we have to learn the case of the wine and honey is even where the wine was destroyed with his own hands in order to save his fellow Jews' honey, and he doesn't specify that he be paid for his wine, the owner must still give him the value of the wine. That's why it's necessary to teach both teachings, because you would think in the first case that because you destroyed it with your own hand, it's obvious that he can see that the wine only got destroyed in order to save his fellow, and he shouldn't have to stipulate that he wants reimbursement for the wine. And we are saying, even in that case where it's direct, he has to state that he needs reimbursement. That's why we need the two separate cases. Make sense, guys?
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan, it kind of sounds like back to that thing, the one time we had that discussion about, whether you're holding somebody in the fire or not, whether it's indirect or not direct, kind of the same kind of concept.
It is. It's the same with the Sanhedrin, where a person ties his friend on the pier and waits for the tar to come in. And it's the same where one lets his fellow go in a pit and the guy starves to death, but he didn't actively kill him. It's the same from the case where you hire a hitman, and this issue about agency for transgression, etc. Why is the hitman responsible more than the person directly?
Okay.
So
it's a case of,
now groma means indirect, and you've got other, which is direct. So there's two different types. This really isn't such a concept in secular law, by the way. And it quite rightly had to be changed in secular law. We can't say secular law is more correct than Talmudic law, but what we are saying is in a society where people don't play by any rules, that their oath, they don't mind taking the name of God in vain in order to get off the hook. So you can't apply that rule where they have trepidation for taking Hashem's name in vain. We can't apply the law of indirect protecting a person because people would hire hitmans all the time and get off from a legal point of view because they're not worried about the next world and the spiritual consequence. So the law had to change based on the low level of the moral fabric and ethical fabric of society today. It had to change. Right. Now that we've done that, so the Gemara says, okay, so now that we're on the subject of the donkey, is the rescuer reimbursed for his donkey if he fails to rescue the donkey of his fellow? Okay. Rav Kahana inquired of Rav if, after making the stipulation that the owner of the less valuable donkey went down to rescue the other person's donkey, and his own donkey then came up from the river on its own, what is the law? Can he not demand the worth of his donkey? So there are two cases here. I'm sorry, guys, I switched them around. The second case that's going to come up is that if you weren't successful at rescuing the other Jew's donkey, are you still compensated if your donkey drowns for trying to rescue his donkey? The first case that's coming up is a different case about what happens if I say I'm prepared to save your more expensive donkey if you will reimburse me for my cheaper donkey should my donkey drown. And then what happens is my donkey doesn't drown. So you might turn around and say, look, the only reason why I'm reimbursing you for your donkey is in order to save my donkey. Yours was at risk for drowning. The fact that yours never drowned would mean that why should I compensate you if there was no loss because your donkey managed to survive? The other spiritual argument is maybe it's a miracle from Hashem, and therefore you're still obligated to pay for my donkey, and therefore it's my benefit. The fact that I got the money twice. One, because of the miraculous recovery of my donkey, when in fact in normal circumstances it should have drowned, but that takes nothing away from your obligation. So I thought about this at first, and I thought, isn't that a bit of a ridiculous premise? Because you'd have to take me to court, because I'd say, listen, pal, I only was going to compensate you in the event that your donkey drowned. Why must I pay you if your donkey, inverted commas, miraculously survived? And the reality is, where can we find a case like this today? Well, if you look at insurance, sometimes what will happen is the insurance brokers will pay a person directly in their account for the car that's been totaled off in an accident. And therefore, it's what you call a financial write-off, meaning it'll cost the panel beaters more to fix than the car's worth. But say your brother's a panel beater, and all you're doing is paying for labor, and he can bang the parts together, and it's really not going to cost him much because he's not working on a retail value. He's doing it on the weekends. Nothing stops you from, in certain cases, from accepting that payment from the insurance company and perhaps paying a small fee to have the car towed to your brother who's a panel beater. Or they might give you the car for free. So the one issue might have very little to do with the other. The obligation of the insurance company is still to pay you. Their obligation is not to turn around and say, well, why is this the case? We know your brother's in the panel beating business. We know you're going to make money off this accident on the side. They can't even turn around necessarily and say, well, we don't want to take it to a more expensive panel beater. You take it to your brother and we pay you what your brother's labor would be in the base cost. Why should we pay retail if you've got a brother in the panel beating business? So there is a caveat here that there are insurance companies where you pay a low premium, and what happens is you have to submit 3 quotes to them. Okay? I think most insurance companies have done away with that because there are a lot of people that charge the least amount of money for panel beating and do a substandard, low quality job, and they've had endless trouble. So they would prefer panel beaters that charge the going rate and are on their roster. Okay? Sometimes the panel beater privately inflates the cost so the person can get back the excess, but that's a different ethical discussion. So what I'm saying is I try to use this panel beating as an example because otherwise you turn around and say the argument is ridiculous. Okay. I hope that analogy sets the tone. So Rav Kahana inquired of Rav, if after making the stipulation that the more expensive donkey owner is going to reimburse the less valuable donkey, and the owner of the less valuable donkey went down to rescue the other person's donkey, and his own donkey eventually came up from the river on its own. What's the law? Can he or not demand money worth of his donkey? Okay. So what we are saying is Rav Kahana inquires regarding a case in which the owner of the animal that was saved agreed to reimburse the rescuer for the loss of his animal. According to Rashi, the rescuer accordingly abandoned his own donkey to the river. Thereby, he rendered it hefker. So this is a concept that doesn't occur in secular law. In other words, the minute it was like the hole of the jar where the honey was leaking, the minute you don't have control of it, it becomes hefker, ownerless. And therefore, why can't the owner of the wine just take the honey without even giving it to the owner of the person that had the honey in his container? Okay, remember we said there was an issue with Rashi and the Rambam. And one of the opinions is that, I think the Rambam, is that the honey would have to have left it in the jar in order for it to be ownerless. And I think Rashi said it's ownerless from the point where it's just a short timeline before it's going to leak. So even in the jar, it's still considered ownerless. So that hefker, ownerlessness, is not a concept that occurs in the same way in secular law. So in other words, if I want to rescue your more expensive donkey, and I can guarantee safe passage of my less expensive donkey, then the minute I let go of my donkey, I've now almost declared it in my mind as dead and gone. And therefore, it's considered ownerless. Pretty much a case that it's likely that it would drown. Because if your donkey and my donkey is in the same water, yours is more expensive, it's probably bigger and a better swimmer. So therefore, if I turn my attention to saving your animal, and then the rescuer's animal then struggled free of the river on its own, and then the owner reacquired it from the hefker ownerless state, the question is whether the rescuer's abandonment of the animal actually constitutes a fulfillment of a condition attached to the promise of reimbursement, in other words, the loss of the animal. So again, one could argue that the rescuer allows his animal to become hefker, he's regarded to having lost it, right? Because he's the one that releases possession and control. And accordingly, the owner of the rescued animal would be obligated to compensate the rescuer, because the only reason he's leaving control of his animal and putting it at risk is to save the rescuer's more expensive donkey. The fact that the rescuer later reacquired the animal is irrelevant, okay? Because he simply acquired an ownerless animal from a hefker state in the interim period. In other words, it wasn't his own. So the argument is perhaps he should be compensated for the animal despite its return. So that's the one side of the argument. On the other side of the argument, saving one's, well, basically, the animal's escape from the river might have negated the obligation of the one whose animal was rescued. Why? Because his obligation was predicated on the rescuer suffering loss. And in the end, he suffered no loss. Okay? Now, before learning this, I would always tend to only go with that second option. Your animal doesn't drown, I'm not paying. Okay. Yes, Kev.
Because that's like, because you get some people that stick to the letter of the law, even though his animal didn't drown. You can say, oh, but I made an agreement with you, you must pay. And it goes to the thing of the sometimes the letter of the law isn't always necessary. And ethically, the guy, as long as he can reclaim his donkey that wasn't taken, if it became hefker, as long as he acquired it, then but unfortunately you get people who will say that's my claim, I deserve it, I'm entitled to because of an agreement, which is not really ethical.
So the truth of it is, the Gemara sees it in a different way. Firstly, the Gemara, in modern day times, there's no ways that you would be paid compensation if your vehicle or asset wasn't damaged in the process, because you're paying in the event. It's all obvious and implicit now. But then we were living in times of what you call miracles, and times where there were other spiritual factors that were taken into Talmudic law. That doesn't occur in secular law. So let me just give you the case. So according to Rav, who said to Rav Kahana, is that he's entitled to full payment, Kevin, as if his animal had died. Let me just explain why I've got 8 minutes. Because at the point that he let it go, his hefker, it's ownerless, and when he reacquired it, it's like reacquiring a lost animal at which you could have picked up any animal in the river. And as for the reappearance of the donkey, according to Rav, he said it's from heaven, because in Shemaim they had mercy upon him and preserved the life of his donkey. So this no way undermines his claim. In other words, according to Rav, the condition attached to the replacement of the rescuer's donkey, in other words, the animal's loss, demands not the animal's death, but only that it leaves his possession, Kevin, and controlled by becoming hefker. And therefore, Rav rules that when the rescuer allows his donkey to be swept away by the river, he's considered to have suffered the loss of his animal, and the owner of the donkey rescued is accordingly obligated to supply the agreed upon compensation. Okay, true, in the end, the rescuer suffered no financial loss. Nevertheless, according to Rav, guys, he's compensated because the return of the donkey was seen as miraculous intervention, a gift from heaven, and it in no way impacts his entitlement, okay? Now, let me just tell you where this sort of concept comes from. It's in the 18th daf of Bava Kamma, okay? Just so you know, it's not a new concept. Now, let me just give you a proof of it, if you remember, is that there was an incident in which Rav Safra was traveling in a caravan, and this lion escorted them and protected the animals from wild beasts and bandits. So what we are saying is here is like the members of the caravan agreed amongst themselves that every night each of them would take a turn and feed a donkey to the lion. Now that lion was used to protect them, almost like a watchdog against thieves and bandits, because no one's going to toy with the lion. And they wanted the lamb to remain well-fed and friendly so that it wouldn't turn on the Rabbonim who owned the caravan, nor would it attack the animals. So the thing of it is they thought they would keep the animals satiated by every night giving it a different donkey. And all who were party to it were legally bound to provide for the donkey. Okay, so one night it was Rav Sifra's turn, and the lamb didn't eat the donkey. Now Rav Sifra hurried and reacquired his donkey before somebody else would take it, because basically by throwing his donkey to the lion, Rav Sifra rendered it hefker, ownerless, because the expectation based on every night of the animal eating a different rabbi's donkey means that the animal was in the habit of this, and since it didn't eat it, it was considered miraculous. But at the point where he let go for the animal to be eaten, and the probability was high based on track record, it almost became a state of ownerlessness. So that's why Rav Safra would have to quickly reacquire the donkey before somebody else would get there first, according to Rashi. So although the other members of the caravan gave donkeys to the lion, they weren't compensated for their losses with share in Rav Sifra's donkey when it was spared. In other words, what they could have said to him is, listen, tomorrow night you will put your donkey out, and you'll put it out every night until it eats your donkey fair and square. But Rav Sifra's initial abandonment of the donkey sufficed to fulfill his obligation to have put himself in equal risk compared to the other members of his party. So the return of his donkey no way obligated him to contribute further to the common cause, okay, or the common effort. So that return of the donkey is considered miraculous, and therefore it's a divine gift to Rav Safra, and he didn't have to further fulfill the obligation by putting the donkey at risk every other night, okay? So the Gemara says, let's see how long we got time quickly. So Rav Safra was permitted to take his donkey back without further obligation to the other members of the caravan. Like in Rav Kahana's case, the one who abandoned his donkey should be permitted to receive it without losing the promised compensation, because it was a miracle. So Rav Acha of Difti said to Ravina, well, why did Rav Sifra have to acquire it? Granted, he abandoned the donkey to the lion, but it wasn't necessary for him to reclaim it. Why? Because when he abandoned it only with regard to the lion, and with regards to everybody else, he didn't abandon it, meaning everybody knew it was his donkey. So the very fact that he had to reacquire it means that, in essence, there's a bit of a problem, because, in other words, it really wasn't hefker. In other words, everybody knew it was his donkey. So if it wasn't hefker, then he never reacquired a different animal. He just took back his same animal. Nobody would dispute that it was his animal. And if he took back his same animal, and he didn't have to actually make this motion of reacquiring it, it's not a new acquisition. So Ravina answered to Rav Difti, technically Rav Safra had no need to acquire it again. And he did this only as an added precaution, meaning the minute he let it go, he fulfilled his obligation to his companions by giving it to the lion. The fact that the lion miraculously returned meant that it was a divine gift, because it was improbable. And therefore, the only reason that he almost reacquired it immediately is he didn't want drama and legal concerns with his fellow Rabbonim in the caravan. So therefore, he hurried to seize it. So the Gemara concluded the case that Rav Safra's animal never became hefker, ownerless, and therefore Rav's ruling still stands, okay? So this is how the comparison runs, and I've got 1 minute quickly, is that in the case of Rav Sifra, he fulfilled his obligation to his companions by simply giving the animal to the lion, and the animal's miraculous return didn't undo his act. In Rav's case, the rescuer fulfilled his obligation by releasing his animal in order to save the animal of his fellow that was more expensive. And therefore, his obligation was released. The miracle return doesn't undo his act of sacrifice, and therefore he's entitled to compensation because it was a divine gift. Okay, we're done.
Yeah.
James, it's kind of like in the Torah when Abraham sacrificed his son. Basically, he gave it up and then reclaimed him
That's a
afterwards.
good example. Arthur's perfectly correct. He passed the test without having to sack because he went through the emotions
Yeah.
of it. And the motion and the act of drawing up the sword. Exactly. Well done, Arthur. That's brilliant, mate. Brilliant. You see, Arthur's got sparks of genius.
But everybody knew it was his son. He had to reclaim it. But they knew just by going through it, that was it.
Yeah.
I don't